Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where today the classic Doctor Who reviews continue with not so much of a classic this week. It's the second Doctor story, the Krotons. So yes, this is a story fairly well renowned for being quite possibly the worst Patrick Troughton story and definitely one of the lower rated Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, or any Doctor Who story shall we say. Written by of course Bob Holmes, one of the most famous and prolific classic Doctor Who writers and really one of the best. Writing brilliant stories like Spearhead from Space, Brain and Morbius, The Deadly Assassin, The Ark in Space, so many brilliant stories. But his first one wasn't really a memorable outing. So yes, unfortunately I think this is an example of when Doctor Who becomes a little bit too boring. There just isn't any, although it's a very interesting kind of, initially it's interesting, it's a good start and setup, and I found in episode 1 I was reasonably engaged. We established this new alien world fairly quickly. We see that it's got two suns and it's rather just a mysterious vibe to it. And it's nice, although yes, it's just a classic Doctor Who quarry that we see quite often in classic Doctor Who, it's still, I think there is a fairly good job of setting up the world. We see all these people, the Gons, and these mysterious Kroton overlords that rule them all and control them all and everything like that. And that's all quite interesting. I think it does work initially. It feels good, feels interesting, and then it just kind of doesn't really get exciting at any point. Obviously in episode 2 we do get introduced to the Krotons, which I'm not quite sure how I feel about the look of the Krotons. I think that it's nice to see an alien race that do look quite alien, quite different, although they do just kind of look like mechanical boxes with little, they kind of look like somewhat like a fake Dalek. Kind of like they're trying to make them look sort of like a Dalek, but not, it feels like. Which maybe isn't the ideal thing they could have done with it. The spinning heads thing we see in episode 4 is kind of interesting and kind of quirky and quite a bit different, I think. But I think the actual Krotons themselves just aren't really that interesting. They do have an interesting kind of way of powering things. They power it through the knowledge of people, and so they use these learning machines to get them to learn stuff so they can use it to power their machines and stuff, and everything. And that's all fairly interesting again, as I say, but it just doesn't seem to ever really go anywhere or get any more interesting from there, I find. In some ways this story gained its reputation due to it back in the sort of 80s and particularly in the 1980s, this being essentially the only Patrick Troughton story that existed in full, or a sort of standard 4-part Patrick Troughton story that's nice and easy to show on TV in a repeat or whatever. This was the only one, and so giving this as the only impression was that the Troughton era kind of, I think, put quite a dampener on things for people at the time, because it just isn't that good. And it's not exciting enough, I think, as a Doctor Who story. There are interesting ideas in there, and there's some interesting conflict between the humans and within the different, well, not the humans, the Gons even within the different Gons. But the Krotons themselves aren't a really charismatic, interesting villain. They just shoot foam at people and stuff, and then they die or whatever. That's all a little bit average. There's a few fun moments, like with the Doctor on the learning machine as well. That's quite interesting. But I think overall this just didn't give a good impression of the Patrick Troughton era. If this was the only episode you saw, it was just kind of rather unfortunate the way it worked out. This was the only story that existed, so I think in some ways it got more of a bad rap than maybe it should have done for that reason. But then having just watched The Invasion, which is just brilliant, it's such a good story, as I said last week, I was just kind of sat here thinking, how have we fallen so far from the brilliant Invasion with Tobias Vaughan and the Cybermen and everything, to then the Krotons and the Gons and Quarry, and it's just kind of sad how much it just... It's nice, it obviously change is important in Doctor Who and we always have new monsters and all that, but this one didn't really work that effectively, I think. It is quite a strong story for the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, particularly the Doctor and Zoe, who are very much sort of working together because they're the two clever people. They obviously end up using the learning machine and get selected to become the sort of powerful minds that the Krotons are going to use for power and everything, and that gives them the real opportunity to sort of, I think, put in quite good performances and work quite nicely together. It's good that Robert Holmes very much focused on using the character's strengths, like Zoe already being very clever, rather than just writing things in to this particular script that fitted the plot. Sort of they're using the character's strengths to the plot, which I think is always a very good thing to do, to be actually having an established character and use them in the way they're meant to be used, not just having plot-specific things that are useful added to their character. So that was quite nice, and there were just so many fun moments, even right at the end of the story when the Doctor and Zoe are having to essentially stall so that the acid will take effect on the Krotons, and they're sort of faffing around saying, well, no, you stand here, no, you stand here, how do I put this on, how do I know? And it's just such a real sort of fun moment. I think that's what the Doctor well, Doctor and Jamie and then the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe sort of relationship is all about, really. They're always just having so much fun travelling through time and space. They're always being a little bit silly schoolchild style messing around, and that just really kind of puts a smile on your face, I think. It just gives a kind of light-hearted, fun moment, even in what's quite a dull and uninteresting story, I think. Ultimately, it's a story where it is kind of difficult to find much to say about it, which I think says a lot about it as a story, is that there is nothing to say about it. Because it is just the peak of bog standard Doctor Who, I think. Alien race, alien planets, there's a mysterious robotic alien that's trying to get power and stuff. And there's a sort of humanoid race that are having disagreements within them, with the old guard being sort of trying to be taken over by the younger, new upstart guy who wants to rule in a different way and thinks he should be able to take control of everything and whatnot. That classic conflict that we see in so many classic Doctor Who stories, and even in the new series a bit as well, I think. So it kind of just, to a degree, pulls on all the tropes of classic Doctor Who. But you could also look at it as it's Robert Holmes establishing his way of writing, and only those tropes, although it feels like a trope now, because I know a lot of the future stories, maybe at the time, if you don't know the future stories, then maybe it's not so sort of troped and generic in that sense, because it hasn't, those ideas haven't been explored time and time and time again up to this point. So I can kind of see that maybe at the time it wasn't quite as badly regarded, shall we say. I think it probably wasn't exactly the most popular one with the kids, just because it wasn't exciting and the monster wasn't very good. But I'm sure it would have had some merit at the time, and does put across a good message as well about not just kind of completely following and just following everything that you're told and accepting everything that is told in life. That in this story, the Krotons, the overlords, will tell you, will control what you know, and that's it. You'll just have to accept and live by that. It's giving that message that no, you should rise up from that, take over from that, learn your own, find out about the world and everything, and learn it for yourself. And so I think that's quite a nice message that's kind of trying to be brought out of this story. They just didn't do it in the greatest way. So yes, overall, hardly one of my favourites. I don't know if it's the worst story I've watched so far, but it's definitely down in the lower echelons of Doctor Who stories. But what about you guys? Are you a secret admirer of the Krotons? Is it not for you? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about the Krotons down in the comments below. But other than that, guys, remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and we'll be back in very soon for the Classic Doctor Who review. See you then. Goodbye.